This is the Kia Sportage or the Kia Sportage, depending on how you want to look at it. It's now in its 5th generation and available as a plug-in hybrid, and that's exactly what we have on review. Prices at the time of filming and in the UK start from £40,000 and extend up to £45,500. Now, in reviewing and seeing if it's actually worth its price tag and how it compares to its rivals and also its sibling, the Hyundai Tucson. So to kick things off, I would like to talk about the electrification process that's taken place with the plug-in hybrid model. Now, first off, you've got a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery pack that supposedly gives you 43 miles of electric range. However, from my own test, I netted 35 miles, which is actually pretty close to the manufacturer's official figures. Now then, you have also got the ability of charging while you're on the move. So yes, 35 miles might seem quite low, but when you're moving around, you actually find that that 35 mile figure claim does seem to extend a lot more than you actually anticipated, because it's almost always running in EV mode, at least where possible. So here you have got the front-mounted 1.6 litre petrol engine serving as a generator for that 13.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. Furthermore, you've got a degree of regenerative braking, which can't be adjusted, but does do it in an intelligent way. Therefore, for example, when you're coasting, going down a hill, or for example, putting your foot down on the physical brake pedal, you can see via your instrument cluster that the vehicle is effectively charging up the battery pack via regenerative braking. Now, just to add another layer on top of that, it is of course a plug-in hybrid, and here you have got a Type 2 port with a 7.2 kilowatt onboard charger. This effectively means that you can go from 10 to 100% in 1 hour and 45 minutes. Should you opt for a regular 3-pin socket, it will take you a whopping 5 hours and 27 minutes instead. Now, past the electrification, what about when it comes to the petrol segment? Well, here you have got a 42 litre fuel tank that will give you roughly 330 miles on a singular sitting. Combine that with the electrification means that you can go for roughly 350 miles without having to stop to refuel or indeed recharge. Of course, that really depends as to where you drive and how you drive. So what about when it comes to the overall MPG? Well, here I surprisingly netted 65 to 70 mpg, which is actually far more than I actually anticipated. See, here I've already tested the Hyundai Tucson plug-in hybrid, and in that vehicle I netted around 40 to 45 mpg. Now, given the two vehicles are operating on the exact same configuration and setup, it did actually take me by surprise. And in this respect, I'm not really sure what's gone on. I can just basically go on the MPG figure that I've got and just base it on the fact that the two vehicles were operating in a slightly different way. Take it as you will, but this vehicle does actually do pretty well in comparison to some of its competitors. As you'll be able to see over here in terms of the mileage leaderboard, you can see that the vehicle actually does do a pretty good job, and therefore competing with some of the best that I've tested, such as, let's say, the Cupra 4 Mentor e-hybrid, or the likes of the Citroen C5X hybrid, and including the Peugeot 408 hybrid. Now, very much like its key competitors, there is a seamless switch between pure electric power and petrol power. And yes, indeed, it is done automatically while you're on the move. The vehicle determines for itself what is best, and it seems to actually do a good job. Now, you can't actually feel it yourself while you're driving, although you will be able to hear the engine kicking into life when it is required. Now, of course, if you're in the sport mode presets, the engine is also prioritized in order for you to dispatch the maximum amount of power. Speaking of which, this brings me on to performance. Here there's a 1.6 litre TGDI 4-cylinder engine that's planted at the front of the vehicle, and you've got a 66.9 kilowatt electric motor, of course in the plug-in hybrid model. The combination outputs 257 horsepower or 261 brake horsepower, or indeed 195 kilowatts of power, and 350 newton meters of torque. I had it tested using RaceLogic's performance box touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.78 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.61 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.61 seconds, which is actually far below the manufacturer's claim of 7.9 seconds, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 3.46 seconds. It'll also have a top speed of 119 miles an hour. Now the combination of all of this actually means that the vehicle is actually pretty nippy, although if you're stepping inside the vehicle and putting your foot down to the metal, you might feel that it's a little bit lazy. And the reason behind that is because of its 6-speed automatic transmission. It just feels a little bit sluggish. And yes, indeed, you can adjust it on the fly via the use of the flappy paddles, but it's not something I would actively recommend. This is the same sort of complaint I had about the Hyundai Tucson, so it's just worth considering that the gearbox over here doesn't seem to have changed. Similarly, the Kia, very much like its Hyundai sibling, has got a soft suspension setup and therefore leads to a rather comfortable driving experience, at least when you're pottering around town, as it soaks up a lot of the potholes, speed bumps and anomalies, and that is thanks to its passive dampening system. However, the manufacturer's configuration does lead to problems when driving at speed, because when I was chucking it around on winding country roads on its sport mode preset, I did notice quite a bit of body lean. With that said, I do appreciate that the overall target market for the Kia Sportage probably won't care all that much. But what will be a cause for concern for most consumers is that the Kia, very much like its Hyundai sibling, feels a bit unsettled on the motorway. Indeed, over here I just feel that its suspension system fails to regulate the small little bumps on the road, and as a result means that if you're going to be frequenting these longer routes, you might want to consider one of the alternatives. On that note, the vehicle hasn't got the beefiest brakes, and therefore means its overall stopping power can't quite compete with some of the sportier alternatives. However, given its overall target market and the use case, I've got no real complaints. Now, where I do have to commend the manufacturer is for integrating an intelligent all-wheel drive system as standard across the entire plug-in hybrid range. Indeed, the vehicle will opt for a front-wheel drive configuration, however will intelligently kick in the rear axle where needed. This effectively gives you a better sort of traction and also access to certain terrain modes, which can be handy in certain scenarios. It's worth noting over here that in the plug-in hybrid market, most vehicles opt for a front-wheel drive configuration or sometimes a rear-wheel drive configuration. So it's actually great to see that both the Kia and the Hyundai do stand out in comparison to some of its competitors and offer a unique selling point for those people that are actually looking for an all-wheel drive plug-in hybrid. So aside from how it performs on the road, what I really love about the Kia Sportage is its overall interior design. Granted, the overall materials and the stitching work are not going to compete with more premium alternatives out there on the market, but when it comes to the use of practicality, it is absolutely fantastic and arguably class-leading. Now, towards the steering wheel, you've got some physical buttons and dials. Behind them, you have got the flappy paddles, which are used to flick through the 6-speed automatic transmission, and then you've got 2 regular stalks. Then towards the center console, you've got a flurry of physical buttons, which are all positioned in the right place, and a rotary gear selector. Now, the real pièce de résistance for me is what resides above the center console. This is a small little touchscreen bar which serves as your media controls and also by the touch of a button can be switched to your climate controls. The 2 physical dials on either side serve as your volume or indeed your climate controls depending on which mode you've actually selected. It's a great way of sprucing out the cabin without taking away the key sort of functionalities, such as of course your climate controls, where a lot of manufacturers opting to eradicate this altogether and put it towards the infotainment system. So I'm all for what Kia have done over here, and indeed is the same that you would have found on the likes of the fully electric EV6. Now, when it comes to the use of technology, you've got a 12.3-inch display that's slightly angled towards the driver, making it actually quite easy to use on a day-to-day basis. Furthermore, it's vivid, intuitively laid out and provides a good degree of customization. Better still, there's support for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, albeit over a wired transmission only. Indeed, at the time of filming, wireless support is not there, and these third-party mobile operating systems do not feed through turn-based navigation to the instrument cluster, which will further heighten the experience like you'd find on some of rival alternatives. Now, on that note, the driver's display sits at 4.2-inch in the normal GT line trim, at least of course if you're looking at the plug-in hybrid models, and moves over to a 12.3-inch size in the level 3 and the GT line S. Now, my main complaints, however, are the fact that you do not have a head-up display, be it in the most expensive trim level or indeed as an option, and that the audio system that's comprised within the GT line and also the level 3 trims are actually quite poor. You've actually got no means of upgrading this either. Indeed, over here, if you do want the 8-speaker Harman Kardon audio system, you'll have to go for the GT Line S. I do think there's a little bit of an oversight from Kia because it underestimates how important the audio system is within a vehicle. If you want some more information about this and some of my subjective opinions, do check out my detailed audio review that can be found up on your pop-up banner, down in the description below, or indeed in the pinned comments. Now, while this is quite disappointing, it is great to see that you've got good storage within the cabin. At the front, you have got the glove box, which is actually pretty sizable and has been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles. Towards the center console, underneath the retractable tray, you'll find a small non-slip area, good enough for a large-size smartphone. This also doubles up as a wireless smartphone charger in the GT Line S. Then you'll find a 12-volt socket, which can be handy for plugging in a dash cam, a USB Type-A port, which can be used to connect up to the infotainment system, and a USB Type-C port, which provides charge. There's a further 2 USB Type-C ports, which are found on the outer edge of the front seats, indeed for your rear occupants. Great little thinking from the manufacturer and a nice sort of positioning. Back to the center console, you have got 2 cup holders which can actually be retracted, therefore providing a larger storage area. And then further down you have got the compartment which is found within the center armrest. It's large enough for a small to medium sized purse or a wallet. Now, to expand on this, the front door bins will accommodate those small size valuables, but it's worth noting that it's actually a pretty slim area. Therefore, a reusable 500ml bottle will be a bit of a squeeze. The same could be said at the rear of the cabin, where the door bins are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited. But you can expand the back of the vehicle, where you have got a pull-down armrest compartment which reveals 2 cup holders. You've also got a small little cubby hole that's found within the rear portion of the center console. Further expanding on this, Kia have integrated small little phone or smartphone holders towards the rear portion of the front headrests. Great to see when you're at a standstill, as it provides some extra degree of entertainment or flexibility for your rear occupants. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot. And in the GT Line S, you've got an electronically operated tailgate. However, in the other trims, such as this one on review, it's manually operated. There's a button found just above the number plate. Now, sure enough, it's very easy to open up. You've also got that hatchback design. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I've got no problems when it comes to loading in and out goods. However, if you're a little bit taller than me, you might want to duck each time you're doing that. My complaint, however, is when it comes to closing the tailgate. Now, yes, indeed, you have got a manual operation and therefore does actually require quite a bit of force. And often I found that when I was closing it, it did actually require me to reclose it, and that's because I hadn't applied enough force. I didn't really demonstrate it properly there, but the best way to do it is actually to do a 2-step approach and get your hands dirty on the exterior of the vehicle. It might be a very small point to make, but it might be a consideration for you to actually look at the GT Line S in order to get that electronic operation, or just something that you might want to look at when you're comparing and contrasting with some of its competitors. Nonetheless, the boot capacity is actually pretty impressive. You've got 540 litres to play around with, and with seats drop down, you've got 1,715 litres. Now, granted, it's not as good as the non-plug-in hybrid alternatives of the Kia Sportage, which sits at 591 litres and 1,780 litres respectively, nor its Hyundai counterpart at 558 litres and 1,737 litres, but it should certainly suffice for your weekly shops. Furthermore, it's actually very practical. You've got 40-20-40 rear split folding seats, which can actually be dropped down by a little mechanism at the rear of the vehicle. Furthermore, you've got a small compartment within the underfloor, and this can be useful for placing your charging cables or, for example, your tyre repair kit. However, it is a shame that the removable and the retractable boot load cover does not fit in the underfloor compartment, and that's namely due to the positioning of the batteries. Now, the positioning of the battery pack does not hamper any of the rear occupant space, although it's worth highlighting that the seats themselves are slightly diagonally wedged, therefore causing a little bit of discomfort on your quad and thigh muscles. Thankfully, however, you have got great source of legroom and phenomenal amount of headroom, so much so that it's class leading. Very much the same that could have been said about its sibling, the Hyundai Tucson. Now, it's further great to see that the transmission tunnel has been kept down to a minimum, therefore meaning that the rear middle occupant can pretty much place their feet completely flat, and also the fact that you have got reclining seats that are fitted as standard. I'm not really sure why you'd want to ever use it in this sort of function, but nonetheless it's good to see that sort of degree of customization. Now, as for the rear outer seats, they can be heated, although this is only present in the level 3 trims and above. As for the front 2 seats, they're heated as standard, and so is the steering wheel. But you will find manually adjustable seats only, and these move over to electric and ventilated seats in the GT Line S only. Speaking of which, on the top spec trim, you've also got a panoramic roof. This unfortunately is not available as an option in the cheaper trims. Aside from how it is within the cabin, what about when it comes to its exterior? Well, looks are very subjective, so make sure you share your own opinions down in the comment section below. What I will say, however, is that it looks a little bit less aggressive than the likes of the Hyundai Tucson. Indeed, here it's got a little bit of those seamless lines and that curvy design, which is really accentuated at the front and at the rear of the vehicle. Here, the latter actually does remind me of the EV6, which is certainly a great thing to see. As for the side, you've got 19-inch alloys that come fitted as standard across the entire plug-in hybrid range, although it's a shame that you do not have body-coloured wheel arches and side skirts to give it a little bit more of that sleeker profile. Nonetheless, I've got no complaints when it comes to its exterior look. Now, as for its towing capacity, it's rated at 1,350 kilograms with a brake trailer and 750 kilograms for unbraked trailer. As for its roof load capacity, it's rated at 100 kilograms. Speaking of which, if you were ever in a serious accident, you will be pleased to know that the Kia Sportage is very safe, not only for yourself but also for your occupants. Indeed, it scored 5 out of 5 stars on Euro NCAP's crash test, scoring 87% in adult occupancy, 86% in child occupancy, and 72% in its safety assist scores. Now, there are also a plethora of driver assistance systems that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range. You've got forward collisioning monitoring system, intelligent speed limit assist, lane following assist, lane keep assist, which by the way can be easily toggled off by long pressing a button on the steering wheel. And in case you're wondering, that is actually because there is a Euro NCAP rule which effectively enables this every single time you step inside the vehicle, and that can be quite cumbersome, specifically if you live on the country roads. Then you've also got a multi-collision braking system, blind spot collision avoidance, parking collision avoidance, highway drive assist, which effectively gives you steering assist while you're on the motorway, making it a little less mundane and therefore a lot more comfortable. And you've also got smart cruise control with stop and go technology, which actually does work a treat in terms of giving you a safe distance between the leading vehicle, and therefore not also giving you that sort of jittery feeling, unlike some of its competitors. Now, if you want to go one step further, you've also got the GT Line S. It adds a blind spot collision avoidance assistance system, a blind spot view monitoring system, which effectively integrates cameras straight into the instrument cluster, therefore meaning when you're indicating, it gives you a little bit more peace of mind to see your surroundings. And you've also got remote park assist and 360-degree cameras. On that note here, you've got great visibility at the front, side and at the rear, and you've also got a rear wiper. Furthermore, it's very easy to maneuver the vehicle thanks to a 10.92 meter turning circle and the fact that you've got front and rear parking sensors and a rear view camera that come fitted as standard across the entire trim range. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict, and quite frankly the Kia Sportage is arguably a better alternative to the Hyundai Tucson. See, here I actually prefer its exterior design, and even in terms of the interior it just feels a little bit more practical, and sure enough you've got a little less boot capacity in comparison to the Hyundai, but other than that you're actually getting a pretty competent all-rounder. The problem, however, is its competitors. They come in at a cheaper price point or indeed offer similar if not better fuel economy. And as a result, I would suggest you to look at some of the alternatives such as from the likes of Peugeot, Citroën, Honda, Nissan or indeed some of the others which I've reviewed and will be down in the description below for your own consideration. Now I'd be curious to know what you make of the Kia Sportage and if you would pick it over the Hyundai alternative, and furthermore if you feel that it is actually a good vehicle given its price point in comparison to its rivals. Now if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.